Hello, welcome to the Homeschool Mommy Mentor. This is your host, Donna Goff, speaking today, and we're going to talk about training our children how to work. And I'm going to start with uh, have you experienced chore wars? Are you tired of chore wars? The more complex any system is, the greater the chance for failure. A chart with rewards attached is automatically a chart with punishment attached. This is a carrot and stick approach. This usually is open-ended time as well. We say that they need to have it done by a certain time so that they can do it anytime they choose. Along that, we think that we're helping them with choices. But actually, this also tends to train them in procrastination, especially if they don't have habit training. If they don't have habit training behind this work that you're expecting them to do, and they're not developmentally ready with self-regulation, impulse control, emotional self-regulation, delayed gratification, etc., those kinds of executive functions, they will tend to procrastinate, and they get in that pattern, which is a habit. And so that is something we're going to talk about today. Many children are not ready developmentally for independent work. Often, the executive functions develop all the way through childhood. It's the last area of our brain that develops, and it develops after we're born. And it develops through the activities that we do and through our body moving in space and our basically like when we swing and slide and twirl and balance and brachiate and those kinds of things, play on the playground, and as well as imaginative play. Whether we're playing hero or we're playing mom or dad or the grocer, we are acting out and we are learning how to self-regulate. And a lot of these things don't all come together and merge into a independently driven toward doing the work that parents would like to see their kids doing on a continuous basis until their mid-teen years, after they've gone through puberty, is where you'll start seeing initiative. You might see it on some children here or there in little things, but it's still a process and it's still development. And many also do not have the foundation of habit training. Many children have never been trained in habits beyond brushing their teeth and putting their clothes on and eating with a fork and drinking out of a cup. Okay, they don't make their beds. They haven't been helped and trained in organizing, as again, the last area of the brain to develop is in the front. And that's where our ability to organize and do those kinds of things is developed. And it develops throughout childhood. And so habit training really becomes essential because it's helping them set a pattern. And the brain likes patterns going back and forth across the same, across the same track. When rewards fail, then punishments are often threatened. And when punishment is a withdrawal of a privilege and that fails, what happens? I really feel that parents usually do not realize that they gave their child a choice when they put this out there, that when you do this, when we give them this family math that's very abstract of saying, if this, then this, and their mind isn't doing the crossover yet. It's not until the parent gets angry, and so children or parents get to think that the only time their child does something is when they get angry with them. We've trained them in that. When parents usually do not realize this, is because we say, if you want this, then do this. And they choose not to want to. At some point, children choose not to be manipulated. They're unmotivated by either the punishment or the reward. I had a friend's son, my child went to go visit on a Saturday and they wanted to play and they were junior high age. And my son arrived fairly early, around 9:30 in the morning on Saturday, and asked if his friend could play. And the mother said, well, as soon as he does his chore. Now, his chore assignment was something he was physically capable of doing. He had two hands. He was strong enough to do it. He knew exactly what was expected of him. But he decided that he wasn't he didn't desire the reward. The reward was to get to play. And he also decided that he didn't want the punishment, which was if you don't do this, then you don't get to play. And so he sat on his bed. And what was the chore? It was a large family with 11 children, and he was the youngest, and all he had to do was wipe the counter. That's it. All he had to do was wipe the counter in the bathroom. And my son came back regularly throughout the day, and this child decided to sit on the bed because he decided in his mind, I was given a choice. If you want this, then do this. If you don't want this, then do this. And he chose not to. And that is a problem when you start affixing incentives, enticements, rewards to try and motivate them to do something that they don't have a habit trained to do. Um, and and he wasn't being disobedient. He was told this is your chore, and if you want, when you're done with it, you can play. If you don't do it, then the message is if you don't do it, then you don't get to play. But it wasn't a disobedience thing. The mom didn't say, go clean the counter. The mom gave him a choice. And see, that's where we confuse our children when we're trying to train them. And what about schoolwork resistance? That's a biggie. Do we treat our homeschool academics as if they were a chore? Here's a bunch of assignments, and when you've completed them, you can play. We have now taken that from this is what we need to do to you want to play, then complete this task. So a child may choose not to, or they might not be developmentally ready to do it on their own. Sometimes we get a child that needs more help because they're not ready yet to follow through on their own because they get distracted easily. They daydream, they see their favorite toy or whatever. Again, they haven't been trained in the habit and the pace of doing so. Honestly, what child is going to do more than the minimum with an ultimatum like that? When you want this, then do this. They get the idea they're being manipulated. Do we get frustrated or even resentful with our children that require our time and attention to help them with academic, paper trail, and busy work? Maybe we need to reconsider the academic paper trail and the busy work. They've already shown through studies that homework assignments that they send home with children to do at home really doesn't improve their academics and their learning. It does take away from them that time that they would normally have time to play and develop their brain and their body balance so that they could have more attention span and executive function. Something to think about. Assigned independent chores are task oriented. I've had a lot of moms tell me, I did chores as a child and I know how to clean a bathroom. I know how to do dishes, but I don't know how to orchestrate it into running a home. Chores are isolating. I came in on a 6-year-old who was loading the dishwasher back in the day, and he wasn't piddling. He wasn't just playing around. He wasn't avoiding the work. He was methodically, but very slowly doing it. And I could feel this intense isolation. And then I realized that for a child in the moment, me telling him, hey, tomorrow your chore is going to be trash, and it's going to be something you can just take out and only take a few minutes. Me trying to reason with him and let him know that some days are hard days and some days are easy days as far as chores go was not flying with him. And I had used it with every one of his 5 older siblings, and with the same result. They were not happy. And I was clueless uh, until I learned about family work and about child training when it comes to work and the steps to go through. So assigning chores also before they have the habit training contributes to work avoidance and procrastination. It's the adult factory model, and it was promoted by factory efficiency experts when children went off to public school full time during the day while parents were in the factories. The schools were designed and modeled after the bell schedule of the factories and the factory breaks. And then factory efficiency experts not realizing uh, what was happening. Let me explain a little bit of backstory. People moved from the country into the cities and worked in factories, and the children that and adults who had been raised in the country were really hardworking, and the factory workers thought it was just about the work, that these children had been working since they were little. So they thought, well, having these children work at home, assigning them tasks to do, etc., will prepare them for working in the factory, and they'll be really good factory workers. What they didn't get was in the country, children worked with their parents, worked with the mom in the house until they were physically able and trained in habits and how to work as a team, and bigger enough to do the hard labor outside, and then they'd go work with their dad. And boys and girls would work with mom for the first while and learn how to work that way. So that was something that was missed. And the fact that children's brains are not developed adult brains, and they don't function the same way, and they're still developing their executive functions. This adult brain based factory model is this assigning of chores before children have been habit trained and have the development to carry them through. Did you know that assigning chores to children is non-biblical? Oh boy, this was a shock for me, because I'll tell you, most homeschooling groups that are Christian homeschooling groups and psychologists and everything else will tell you chores, chores, chores. And it's not in the scriptures. Both work and diligence are extolled in the Bible, but there are no passages in the Bible on assigning chores or anything like unto chores to children. If you can find them, contact me. I'll take it back. But I have not found one. I have found examples about working with children, uh, teaching them, etc., but I haven't found any on assigning chores. So assigning chores are non-biblical. They are a cultural construct. So let's look at some Bible verses. First one I take is from the New Testament, Ephesians 6:4. And ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Now, the word provoke, it says, fathers, provoke not. Provoke is paragizo, and it means to rouse to wrath, to provoke, to exasperate, to anger, pushing their buttons. So let me look at that. Provoke not your children unto wrath. So we're not supposed to use uh, paragizo, that button pushing anger. When we get angry at our kids and we think that the only way they're going to move is when we're yelling at them and everything else, we are in opposition to this verse. And the word wrath, it says, provoke not your children unto wrath. Well, wrath is paragizo too. So we are not supposed to train them in wrath by being wrathful. So we've been cautioned here. And the next word is to bring up is ektrepho, and it means to rear up to maturity, to cherish or train, to bring up and to nourish, kind of like a tender plant. And then the next one was nurture, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. The word nurture here is paideia, and it's a Greek, Athenian Greek concept of whole child training for their life. It's an education of children, the cultivation of their mind, their morals, and their body. So raise them up in the nurture of the Lord and the admonition of the Lord, the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And admonition is nouthesia, and it means admonition, exhort, and instruct. That's very interesting when you look at that way. And I thought, well, what is the Lord's, raise them up in the nurture or paideia of the Lord? What is the Lord's paideia? Well, as I started searching on what paideia is and searching the scriptures, I thought of two verses in the Old Testament that talk about how the Lord has instructed parents to instruct their children. And I started seeing it as leadership parenting. And this is what I see as the Lord's paideia. I believe that rearing children is found in Deuteronomy. In Deuteronomy chapter 6. And the previous chapter talks about the 10 Commandments. And this is what the Lord says in Deuteronomy 3. Hear therefore, O Israel, and observe to do it, that it may be well with thee, that ye may increase mightily, as the Lord God thy fathers has promised thee, in the land that floweth with milk and honey. And then verse 4, hear, O Israel, the Lord, our God, is one Lord. And then Deuteronomy 6:5, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy might. And these words, verse 6, in these words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart. And here's the key. And thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and thou shalt talk of them as thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. And I thought that there's furthermore, he talks about putting it on the doorposts and on their foreheads and on their wrists. And to me, that meant that our homes should reflect his truth, and that our hands should be busy in action doing those things he wants us to do, and that it should be on our mind. And so as we talk to our children, and I thought, how interesting, the Lord is asking us to talk with our children as we sit down with them in the house, and as we walk by the way, and as we lie down, and as we rise up. He doesn't tell us to tell them this. He tells us to teach it to them and talk with them. And thou shalt talk of them as thou sittest in thine house. And it's very interesting in child development. They found that when they put advantaged children into preschool, their verbal development slowed down because in the home, there's conversation, there's discussion, there's back and forth in the conversation, and that is where they develop their verbal abilities. Whereas in the preschool, there's not that one-on-one, and so there's not that verbal um, development that's going on. But also, if you have work to do in your home and you are doing dishes and preparing meals and you have your children with you and you're talking with them and discussing with them about, oh, I'm sorry, it looks like the lighting is flashing here. Talking with them about uh, their beliefs and about the Lord, etc., as um, they're working with you. And ancient Israel didn't send their children off to school before Babylon because they felt that they could not follow this verse. So they didn't have public schools, even though their neighboring countries did, they did not. And I really feel that there's so much packed in this verse about the Lord's Paideia. The other verse I was thinking of is in Proverbs, and I will talk about that in the next video. But this one here, you can ponder this one over and over again. It has so many aspects in child development, in training, in teaching, and teaching habits. So this is an active, in the trenches type of parenting. This sets the context for the next video in our series of how to teach your children how to work. In this series, we will talk about a way of child training that is in accord with the verses or the verse, yes, that we just discussed. And so subscribe below so you don't miss how to train your child how to work. And join our newsletter so you can keep updated of the latest videos and blog posts and offerings. And above all, until next time, enjoy the journey.